Here and we'll get started. Well, it's July 4th. Happy Independence Day. Hope everybody had a good time today. Ate plenty of hot dogs and hamburgers. I'm guessing most of you, other than Carrie and Angela, will be watching this video later. I'd love to take the week off, but since we only have 10 weeks, we don't really have a week scheduled in. And I know everybody has classes the other night, or I do, and so tonight's the night. So we'll roll on. It's week 7. This is Mels 603 for summer of 18. This week is staff selection, contracts evaluation, and the law, HR websites, teachers' rights, managing human resources, hiring and retention, employee evaluation. I had you interview an administrator this week about human resource practice and also about employee assistance, compensation plans, and benefits. Now, the reason why I have you do those is they vary from district to district, state to state, public school to charter school. Charters are public, but traditional public to charters to privates. But there are certain similarities, or the law is the same on all of those in terms of equal employment, opportunity, interviewing, how you conduct yourself, the types of interview questions that you're allowed to ask, those kinds of things are similar in all districts. You need to know what benefits your folks have, even though you may not be directly involved in that and things like salary, but you need to know what your district offers in terms of compensation plans, because you'll get asked. And when you have folks who are struggling for whatever reason, you need to know what employee assistance avenues are available so that you can refer those people to them. Many times, school administrators get in trouble trying to take action against a teacher or involved with an employee when they haven't run them through the district's employee assistance program. So I encourage you to find out what's in your district, where you work now, and when you get your first job, you need to know those kinds of things, what's available. Some districts have more than others, but all districts that have some form of employee assistance, that's your first step before you can start moving against somebody, an action for performance. So make sure you understand that. Compensation, you don't have any part in that as a principal, but you'll be asked. We were laughing the other day. One of the things that I made sure that new teachers understood when we would tell them, let me mute everybody here. One of the things that I got into quite frequently is I would hire somebody, and what they were told that they would make is not what they got the first paycheck, and they would come running to me all excited and disappointed or angry or whatever, and I would have to explain to them that if you are on a 10-month contract, you get paid that much for 10 months. If you have that spread over 12 months, you will get less every month for those 12 months. Now, you think I'm joking, but you'd be amazed how many beginning teachers thought it was an IQ test when they said, do you want 10 checks or 12 checks? They assumed that they got 12, they'd get the same amount as if they've got 10. No, we divide up how much you make by 12 rather than 10. So yes, you get less than if you get paid, but you get paid in the summer as well. And so things like that. And sometimes they would get the pay wrong, and sometimes wouldn't get paid at all in a large district. And so you need to know what's going on. You need to be able to explain basic things about compensation and benefits. You need to be able to explain how insurance and retirement works. You need to be able to answer those questions to some extent, and then know the people to refer them to for fuller or deeper questions. You need to know those things. It's important. So that's what tonight is. We're also going to talk about evaluation. I'm not going to talk specifically about going in the classroom and doing an observation. You'll be trained on how to do that in your district. Every district does it a little bit differently. What I'm going to talk about is the overview, the legal ramifications of teacher evaluation tonight. All right, so that's where we are now. Okay, share screen, desktop. All right, let's see. Let's see where we are with task stream. This is week 7. You should be completing skip task 2. I graded a lot of those last night. I've seen a couple today, and you should be starting skip task 3 to stay on board with that. So yes, you're doing fine. Let me remind you in skip task 2 that you need to develop a graphic organizer that has specific activities over on the left, and those specific activities are what you're come from the recommendation to address short and long-term goals and leadership improvement in task 1. So in task 1, you develop some short-term goals and some long-term goals for communication. Short-term being social media and those kind of things, long-term being different parent events. And you also had some recommendations for improving school leadership after you did an evaluation of that from Teacher Working Conditions Survey. So you've got three sets of recommendations basically from task 1. In task 2, you were to develop some specific activities for those and determine what specific human and physical resources you need to address those. It's good to have recommendations, but you got to have specific activities. And your specific activities shouldn't just be, well, we want to improve communication. Well, that's fine. How are you going to do that? Improving communication is a recommendation. Using Twitter is a specific activity. And then we need to know what that's going to cost and who's going to do it. That's what human and physical is. I should see dollars and I see people's names. I don't want to see staff or teachers, or I want to know who exactly is going to do this stuff and how much money is it going to take to do those. And that should be in a graphic organizer. I should be able to see specific activity, cost this much money, this person's going to do it. That's what I need to see in task 2. This will help you in the next phase in task 3 when you build your marketing plan, because those are the kinds of things. Then you'll add the timeline, you'll add your formative summative assessment, your goals and indicator of success, and you'll have your marketing plan. So this will be half of your marketing plan. It'll be much easier to develop your marketing plan if you have it done this way. All right. So that's where we are with our evidence artifacts. All right, hiring decisions. Number 1 rule, it's all about relationships. Please remember that you don't hire anybody. You recommend to the superintendent recommends to the school board, and the school board hires people. There is a process. I had you go through that where you contact you interview the principal about how you go about hiring somebody. How do you know you have a position available? How does it get advertised? Do you do the interviewing? Does somebody else send you candidates? Is it online? I mean, it's different everywhere. In Charlotte-Mecklenburg, the last district that I worked in, when I was principal there, we had analysts. And they sent us 3 people, and they were already vetted. They'd already called the references. They'd already done the background check. They'd already checked the license. They did everything. We just did an interview and decided who we wanted and made the recommendation back. Some districts, you have to do the calling. You have to do the references. It's different everywhere. But the thing that's the same is that your board or your executive board or whoever ultimately is in charge of your school or school district is the person who technically hires that person. And you don't get the go ahead to hire until they make the ultimate decision. It shall be the duty of the superintendent to recommend and the Board of Education to elect all principals, teachers, and other schools personnel. That's what it means. The board actually makes the decision. Make good informed decisions, children first, be thorough. A sub is better than a bad hire. Now, I have people who argue with that, but I firmly believe that a substitute is better than a bad hire because it's hard to get rid of a bad hire. Um, you know, getting the right people on the bus is most important. You'd rather have you would rather have a somebody that you can change out than somebody you get somebody and then you can't. Now, it's not that I couldn't have made a bad hire, but I inherited a bad hire. Um, and when I was a junior high principal, I inherited a bad hire. What that means is the principal that was there hired somebody early in the summer and then unexpectedly left, and I inherited this new hire. He did not do his due diligence, and I got a bad hire. I could have made the same mistake. I would have hoped I wouldn't have, but I very well could have made the same mistake. And it took it took 2 years to get rid of this bad hire. And you say, well, Dale, that sounds hard to get rid of. But that's exactly what it was. It took me 2 years, and it wasn't. And the reason why it took 2 years is it wasn't a performance issue in terms of teaching. It was a substance abuse issue. And she would go to employee assistance, and that would protect her for 6 months when she'd fail a drug test. Now, I don't know if I could have picked up on that, or I don't know how she passed the drug test to begin with. I'm not sure how that worked. But if you get a bad hire, when I mean somebody who's just completely, you just take anybody, you're just flagging people down. That's not a good thing. You never know. Some people you hire, you think they're going to be great, and they're not. And then some people you think, well, they'll be good, but then they end up being great. Beginning teachers, I've only ever had one great one, and I've hired a lot. I only ever had one great one first year out. And I had some that became great later on. We had to spend a lot of time, effort, and energy, but I only have one that I hired that walked in first day and just set the place on fire. And so there's some chance in hiring, but if you know somebody's just not the right person, but I got to have somebody, don't hire the wrong person. There's always a chance when you hire anybody, but if you know that they're not a good one, don't hire them. A sub's better than hiring a bad one. And so, would you want your child in this person's class, and how will this person impact your school culture? We all know it's easy to hire in April. It's a lot easier than it is in August to find good people. These are all these are all just common sense things. This is basically how it works. Vacancy announcements, it varies in each one. The reason I have this slideshow is you can work through this. This is kind of standard of how it works, but the things that are important in this is don't hire somebody if you know they're not going to be good. You stay with the substitute. And the thing to ask always is, how will this person dispositionally affect your school culture, and would you want your child in their room? And then after that, it's the answers to the questions that they have. Now, I've got some questions here. These are for principal candidates. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, I guessed right. These are the kinds of questions that you can ask. This is for school administrators, but they're common to teachers as well. Tell us about your educational background. Tell us about your professional work experience. Why do you want to be a teacher? What are your goals in 5 to 10 years? Parent-school communication, faculty social functions. What is your strengths and weaknesses? How would you improve school community relations? You can see the kinds of questions. You can't ask what your religion is, how old you are. All of those kinds of things are off limited. These are the kinds of questions that you can ask. If your district does not have an interview protocol, and most of them do now, if they don't, you need to develop one and get it approved by your HR people. Let me say that again. Most districts now have an approved set of interview questions for teacher candidates that principals and assistant principals are to use. If you sit in on the interview, you notice they pass the questions around now. Well, they didn't just go eeny, meeny, miny, mo and make those up. Those came from the HR department. If your district does not send you a set of questions from the HR department, you need to make a set, send it to them, and get it approved. You do not want to ask an inappropriate question and get sued. That's the point of this one. You can see this is all stuff about the job. There's nothing personal. There's nothing about how, gender issues or race issues or age or any of those kinds of things. All that stuff's off limits. So you can see the kinds of questions that you can ask. Again, your district will usually have a standard set of questions for you to use. If they do not, you make one, send it to them, and get it approved. Stay out of jail. All right. All right, let's see what else I've got here. All right, here is, I'm going to shift gears now. Here is the principal and assistant principal evaluation manual for the state. At some point, we're going to try to do paper performance. We're already trying to do paper performance again. This is the standard manual about how you're evaluated. I've got another PowerPoint here that speaks to merit pay. We're attempting to do differentiated pay again, paper performance, for principals and teachers. We're trying to do that again. Sure. We first started that in the 80s with the Career Development Pilot Program. We attempted to do a merit pay program. And so we're going to attempt it again. Last time it was based on classroom evaluations only. This time around it's going to be based on classroom evaluations 50% and student scores 50%. Now, the student scores are not going to be the old comparative accountability model, where you compare one kid against another, one school against another, one grade against another. This is going to be on the growth model in EVOS, where you have a predicted score that a child should make to show a year's growth, raw score-wise, what they should make. And then teachers will get meritorious pay or differentiated pay if 85% of their students achieve growth. Principals will get merit pay if 85% of their teachers meet expected growth, in terms of 85% of their kids making growth. So that's the model. Now, right now, the evaluation for teachers and principals, I think it's about 20%. It varies. I don't think any district's counting more than about 20% of a teacher's or principal's evaluation on test scores right now. But the goal and I've got the, I think that was the one that I closed. Let me go back and open it back up if I can get this to move out of the way. Since 2013, it's been in the works. It's called EVOS Standard 6. And if you don't know about that, it's here. This is 5 years old, but this tells you where we're trying to go. That eventually it'll be 50-50. And so, and it has all of the metrics in it. So we're not there yet, but this is where we're headed. So you as a potential administrator, and some of you are already in that role, need to understand that we're headed back to merit pay again. And it's going to be, the heart of it is going to be student test scores. There will still be traditional evaluation, the teacher evaluation manual, the principal. So half of it will be your evidence artifacts as a principal and assistant principal. You can't get away from those. That's how you're going to be evaluated. When you become an AP or a principal, you have to do evidence artifacts, same as you do now. That's why we have you do it now. Teachers are evaluated using the McREL instrument. But eventually that will only be half of the evaluation. The other half will be EVOS, the kind of scores you made as a teacher, and then the kind of scores your school made as a principal. That's how you will be evaluated. Now, I said all that to say this. The biggest issue I find with aspiring administrators, and even some in the role, is when somebody asks them, where did that projected score, that EVOS score, come from for that kid? Where did that come from? It says here that this kid must score 112 out of 100, raw score of 112 out of a possible 165. How did we determine that 112? Well, there's a formula. Now, it's a proprietary formula. The SAS Institute, SAS, and the Research Triangle in Raleigh have developed the EVOS model, which is value added. Now, the common misconception is all they do is look at previous test scores, and that's how they determine what a child's gross score is. Now, we all understand the gross score is. This is the score that the child has to score on the standardized test in order to show that he's made a year or she has made a year's growth. The biggest misconception is that projected score was developed by using only previous test scores. That is not true. Now, I have guesstimated what they are using. I believe that there are 10 dependent variables that affect that independent variable. The independent variable being that projected gross score, what they have to make. And so I have an EVOS lesson plan for us to look at tonight. So all the things that I've talked about are right here. 85% for teachers, 85% of teachers for principals. That's how you're going to get your meritorious pay. Somebody's got a question. What would you use for non-tested courses like PE? You'd use the school composite. That's in that standard 6 PowerPoint that I've got. If you look at that, it speaks to that. So if you're in a non-tested, it will be the composite score for your school. All right, here we go.
Right.
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
It's Carrie. When we discussed this before, because like I teach currently a local level course. It's a local course option, but it's an engineering course.
Yeah.
And we always felt, and maybe you can bring light to this, how is that fair then? If we're, you know what I mean? If our merit pay is based off the entire school versus what we've done.
What's going to happen, I feel certain, is initially it'll be based on the composite, but supposedly they're going to develop assessments for everybody. Once they get it fully vested, up and running, There, just like that local course, there will be a benchmark assessment for that course as well. Now that's their plan.
Right.
Now you know that in 1983, 84, 1984, the basic education plan was passed. It took 5 years to write the standard course of study.
I know.
In 1984, we said every child in the state gets a basic education. Somebody said, "What's that mean?" I said, "We don't know. We better go figure it out. We better go write it down. This is what every kid's supposed to have." It ended up being the standard course of study that stayed in place for 25 years. But it took 5 years to write. And so that's what I'm telling you is we get the cart before the horse. We'll put this assessment in, and we will use the school composite initially. It'll take a little while, but their plan is they will develop a local, even if it's a local course, they will develop a benchmark assessment for every course.
Right.
A lot of CTE courses already have those built in.
Yes.
And so they'll use those. But eventually the idea is that every course will have a benchmark examination, and you'll be able to project what a child should make in your class, and then you'll be held accountable for 85% of them making that benchmark, or the benchmark for that particular child. Understanding that in EVOS there is no flat score for pass fail. In EVOS, every kid, his pass fail is based on him. Every kid has a different score, and so that's what's going to take a little time. I know they're going to try to get to it as quickly as they can, but it's going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to take money because EVOS is again, that's a private company. They'll have to pay them to do it, but they'll be able to. It's just if they've got the money and the political will. But that's where they're headed.
Okay.
So that's a great question.
All right. Thank you.
But I'm like you. I'd hate to be held accountable for everybody else in the building on a composite score. I wouldn't mind being held accountable for what I teach mine.
Exactly.
But we've done that forever.
I prefer the growth model because now I can show that I have differentiated to make that, whatever, I can meet that student where they're at. Versus
with the old comparative accountability model is that was all about pupil assignment. If you got the good ones, you were golden. If you didn't, you were hosed. I used to tell my wife, the 15 years that Davidson IB, the lab school at Davidson College, was open, they had only 240 students. They had a cap. They had the 240 best and brightest students in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. You can imagine the brain power of that group. And so I used to tell my wife the most important person in their organization was the custodian. As long as they could get the front door open where the kids could come in, they were going to be fine. The scores would walk right in. The only problem that they had is that the door was locked and they couldn't get in.
Right.
And, and then there was other places that you couldn't have made if you'd had guns. Because you had, in comparative accountability, it's about who you get, not what you do with them.
But in the growth model, I'd rather have the lower end.
Well, in the growth model, if you understand it, all that's accounted for.
Right.
And so that's what, let me kind of show you what that is. The formula for determining the raw score that represents a student making a year of growth is a linear regression in which the variance of all the dependent variables, that's all the X's, is added together to derive the raw score or the independent variable. That's the score, the projected score. They dumped more than 20 years of test data in there. And so if you look at the formula right here, you add all those together and you come up with that projected score. And so from here are the 10 dependent variables that I believe, again, this is a private company. They haven't told me this, but from my research, this is what I believe that the formula is. Here are the 10 variables that they use. They look for the variance in each of these to determine what a child's score should be. Race, mother's education, father's income, The teacher is only 10%, but that's the strongest thing that you have, that the school has control over. The school district, the school, the grade, the age of the child, the gender, and previous test scores. Those are the percentages that analysis of variance from all the research that I've read tells us. These are the weights. This is how much these matter. This is not my opinion. This is from research. These are the things that factor in. All right. So the only dependent variable that can be affected by the school is age versus grade and teacher. So the lesson to be learned here is retaining students so that their age and grade doesn't match hurts test scores. And so this has implications for remediation. So why do you think North Carolina requires everybody to use response to intervention now? Because we know that retaining them really hurts our ability to make growth with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that grade, age, school, gender, when you add all those together, it's about 20%. And so you got to stay away from retention, and you need a good teacher. Quality teachers can contribute 10%. So you have to have good teachers. All right. So here's my model to help teachers. This is my staff model, my MTSS for teachers, multi-tiered system of support. That I believe that you have to really work hard on Marzano, and you have to do it 3 different ways: whole group, PLCs, and one-on-ones. This is I believe every school should be running a staff development, professional development model like this for Marzano and high yield strategies, because high yield strategies is where you get your test scores. Now you can say, but Dale, that's teaching to the test. No, there's a lot of good stuff in Marzano. I mean, there's cooperative learning, there's similarities and differences, there's homework, there's questioning and cluing. There's a lot of good stuff in there that's not just teaching to the test. But this is my model that I believe that every school ought to be operating on. I won't go through it step by step, but this is, you've really got to work those high yield strategies, and that's why they're called high yield strategies, because they yield very good results on standardized tests. And so you've got to have a model where your faculty does it all the time, not just every now and then, but all the time. And so this is my model right here that I have written out. And basically, the 3 delivery methods. We start with new teachers. They have one-on-one. Make sure that your coach and your mentee don't have common planning time. When we work on the master schedule, we want them to be in each other's classrooms while they're teaching. The biggest mistake you can make with new teachers and their mentors, put them on same period planning. They never have any examples, and the mentor doesn't get to go watch them teach because they're planning the same time, and the mentee doesn't get to go see the master teacher work. Stagger their planning times, and they'll get to be in one another's classrooms when it matters. Those are the kinds of things that you need to do in your master schedule. That's important. That should be a priority. When we talk about best practices, number 4, scheduling, federal law, state law, local board of education policies. Number 4, best practices. A best practice is to make sure your mentors and mentees, your new teachers, don't have common planning. That's a best practice in this model. Now, let's get down to the actual numbers. So here is an actual, I didn't use his last name, so we're good. Here's an actual student. Jamar is a 3rd grade student in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. His dependent variables are, he is black, so he gets 20 out of 30 possible points. White would be 30. Hispanic would be 10. That's the way numbers purred out. That's not racial. That's not about race. That's about the categories that this is, that's the ratio that they score. His mother has less than a high school diploma, so that's 5 out of 15. If his mom had a 4-year degree or beyond a 4-year degree, that would be 15 points. People say, why does mother's education matter so much? Who's at home with the child? Lap time? Who sits and reads to the child when they're in the formative years? That would be their mother. Mother's education, father's income. Jamar had no father in the home, so he got 0. If the father's income was in excess of $150,000, it would be 15. He'd get 15 points. Why is that important? If dad makes more than 150, mom can stay at home, be a full-time parent to that child. The teacher is 10. CMS is a high wealth district, so 5 points for that. Low wealth would be 2. He was at Billingsville Elementary, take over school, so he gets 0 points. If he'd been in a high growth school, it'd been 5 points. Grade, he was in the 5th grade, not a repeater. His age, he only gets 3 points because he's developmentally delayed and started school at age 6, and so he only gets 3 out of a possible 5 points. His gender, he gets 5. Female would be 4 due to the difference in male and female math scores. The opposite would be the case if it were reading. The male would get 4, the female would get 5. Previous scores 2s not on grade level according to M class coming out of 2nd grade. So this is what his equation looks like. 20 points plus 5 plus 0 plus 10 plus 5 plus 0 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5 plus 2 equals 55%. The total possible raw score on that 3rd grade math test is 180. We multiply that by 0.55. So he's got to score 99 to be on grade level out of 180 to show a year's growth on a math EOG. It would be a little bit different, be slightly less on the reading because he's male, but everything else would be the same. That's how EVOS is done. They do a linear. Now, they didn't go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. They did an analysis of variance that tells us how much weight to put on each one of these. Over 20 years of test score data, and they had the demographics that went along with it. We know all these things about a child. They dumped it all in, and they said, this is how much everything counts. So this is how the raw score is projected. So when teachers come to you, and the point of this is when teachers come to you and say, but I've got this kid, and he's been held back one time, that's factored in. With this kid, he doesn't have a dad in the home, that's factored in. This child is this race, this child is that, this child is that. That's all factored in. So this thing is very accurate, as you already know. But the notion that we could be this accurate just using previous test scores is kind of a pipe dream. We know all these things about a child, and we know what the test scores, the variance comes out from the test scores, and we dumped all this data in. So it is based off test scores, but the dependent variables are the demographic information on that child related to those scores. So this is how it's done. So when teachers come to you and say, I want this group because they'll, or I want that group, that's a good thing because certain teachers can teach certain kinds of kids better. I fully understand that, but but mathematically, everybody has an equal chance. If this kid had, been different and he had to score 160 out of 180 to be on grade level, but he would have a better chance to do that. But we all know different teachers work better with different demographics. And so it's your job to find the teachers that you can plug into certain kids and get the best out of them. Some teachers want to teach the lower ones. They believe that it's easier to get growth out of them. Conversely, some teachers want to teach the high ones because it's easy, because they're much easier to manage. But all that's factored into this growth model. So you can see this thing is not easy. It'll take a few years of data from a particular test to be able to generate this thing. So I'm guessing 5 years. Back to Carrie's original question, if there's a local test of some sort, it'll take about 5 years, not because it takes that long to figure out the regression equation. It takes that long to collect data. You need about 5 years worth for it to be reliable. And once they have 5 years of data, they'll plug it right in. They can tell you what a kid needs to score. Now, I've heard that they're going to try to speed that up and maybe get 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But generally, it takes about 5 years. But that's how we calculate what a child should make. So just understand, You're going to be asked, faculty members are going to have all kinds of notions about EVOS, all kinds. Oh, I got the lowest ones. Well, I'll never make it. Well, they don't have to score nearly as high. Or I got the high ones. It'll be hard for me to make it. Well, but you don't have to show too much growth from last year to make it with the high ones because of the headroom effect. They don't have as far to go. All that's factored in. But you need to understand that the growth model is by far the most equitable model that we've ever seen in terms of school accountability, because you're just comparing a kid against himself, not some unrealistic comparison with, one kid from one side of town and one kid from the other. And comparing schools from, because they're in the same district does not mean that they look anything alike. We all know that. Let me go to the chat. Thank you, Carrie. All right. I think I've covered everything that I need to cover tonight. I could get into this more, but I won't. The one thing that I do want you to give a look to, is this MTSS for teachers. I truly believe that if you're going to be successful, that you're going to have a best practices model, a growth model, professional development model in your school. You may have other things, but you're going to have, this is going to be the core of what you do. But the ramifications of this, with this particular course we're in this summer, is this is a nightmare to schedule. I'll be the first guilty. This thing is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. It has to be truly a priority in your schedule. It's not going to be easy to schedule this thing. And that's why people don't do it. They look at it and say, oh, my Lord, I've got to make sure that mentors and mentees don't have common planning, but if they're in the same grade level, that, it's just easier to do, all third grade planning at one time. Or if they're in subject area, the same subject area, it's hard to do that. And then you got to have mentors that aren't maybe in the same subject area or the same grade level. And people just throw up their hand and say, oh, it's just easy to do it the old way. But if you truly want to make a difference in your building for teachers and kids, you may have to go the extra mile and really work hard on that master schedule to get it where you can plug something like this in. Now, I'll tell you, you got to do a mosaic, which is a schedule within a schedule. You got to do a mosaic schedule to be able to pull this off, and that's pretty high level stuff. And you still got to meet your federal, state, and local guidelines, laws and guidelines still. But number 4, when you get to best practices, I believe a best practice, the biggest best practice is you got to find a way to accommodate a growth model, staff development plan for teachers based off Marzano and best practices. Otherwise, you're going to get killed in EVOS. I mean, this is what goes with EVOS. If you want your EVOS scores to be where they need to be, you got to do Marzano's best practices. It's just that simple. You got to find a way to accommodate this kind of schedule. Questions anybody has? I wanted to be done in 30 minutes, and it's taken me 45. I talk too much. Dr. Pickard, are you available Friday?
Yes, sir.
You going to be in Mooresville?
I will be. I can be anywhere else you need me for Friday.
What about Panera Bread there at Williamson Road, 150, about 11 o'clock?
Okay, we can do that. We met there before, hadn't we?
Yeah, and we'll talk about your presentation for CILD. That's the point.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, we'll do that. The new man's here, and I've gotten a little more clarification, a little more clarity on that. So we'll meet this Friday.
Okay.
11 o'clock at Panera. Anybody else have anything? Go watch the fireworks. They'll start here shortly. Everybody have a good holiday. I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you for joining me.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.